The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. So, this book, even though by now it may have kind of fallen by the wayside, was once upon a time one of the most influential philosophical works in the Western world. Throughout the Middle Ages, it was pretty much a requisite read for scholars. Now, Boethius was a Roman senator and philosopher in the early Christian era under Theodoric, I believe. He was also Magister Officiorum. I don't know exactly what that denotes, but it sounds impressive, and it was apparently a big deal. But Boethius pretty much had it all. He had status, he had renown, he had fortune, and he had a lot of learning. But tragically, Boethius eventually lost almost all of that due to a stance that he took as regards certain touchy court politics. And he was, I believe, pretty much betrayed by some people he knew and ultimately wound up imprisoned and set for execution. Um, he was killed, I believe, in the year 524 AD, which means that his death occurred 1500 years ago as of this year. The date of his execution, I believe, is normally thought to be in late October, so my review here of his work, well, missed it by that much. But Boethius is also, I believe he has also been canonized as a saint in the Christian tradition, which I don't really understand why that is because his death was not because of his faith. It didn't really have anything to do with Christianity. So I'm not sure exactly why he has been canonized, even though he really wasn't a martyr, but whatever. Anyway, this book, The Consolation of Philosophy, is an example of prison literature. It was written by Boethius during his imprisonment as he was awaiting his execution, and it was written to help him come to terms with the new and vastly reduced status of his fortunes in the world. It is, in the spirit of Plato, presented as a Socratic dialogue between the imprisoned Boethius and a female figure, which I believe he refers to as Lady Philosophy. She is the personification of philosophy, who has come to minister to him in his darkest hour and to lift his spirits and remind him who he truly is. So, over the course of this book, and it's not a long book, it's fairly short. But over the course of the book, Boethius and Lady Philosophy discuss such matters as the vagaries of fortune, also theodicy. It is a book very concerned with theodicy, with defending the goodness of God, even in light of a world in which upright people like Boethius can be laid so low while bad people prosper seemingly. Also, it also touches on topics such as free will and the way that this kind of works with divine omniscience and such. So that's pretty much the arc of the work. It's Lady Philosophy ministering to Boethius and trying to set his mind at rest regarding the fate which has befallen him. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting book. I have to say that it's really a book that I think a lot of solace can be found in, even though the conclusions that Boethius reaches on some things, a lot of things perhaps, are highly debatable, I think. So, a lot of the book is concerned with Boethius bemoaning his own misfortune and saying, I had it all and I lost it all, and now I'm basically nothing. And Lady Philosophy kind of says to him that fortune, the things outside ourselves, it kind of plays in, like, I think, in like the Stoic tradition. Things outside ourselves are beyond our control, and all that we can really manage is our reaction to things, and that we shouldn't become so attached to what we're bound to lose anyway. That's not really conducive to happiness by latching on to things that you can't really hold on to indefinitely. And then we come to the theodicy aspect of the work, where Boethius is like, I'm a good person. I stood up for what was right. I have always held my head high and tried to walk in righteousness. And now look at me. I have been laid so low. I have lost pretty much everything that I had. I'm set to be executed, and I'm innocent. And the people that betrayed me are outside living it up right now. How is this just if we live in a world that is, supposedly governed by a just and good God? And Lady Philosophy goes on to explicate to him how um, all fortunes ultimately work out for the good, that all things ultimately work out for the good, that God has a plan, everything, works out the way that it needs to, according to God's will, and that also true strength does not lie in evil. And this is one of the most valuable things that I think you can get out of the book, is that true strength does not lie with evil. Villainy is actually quite weak and impotent when you really look at it, um, you know, intensively. True strength comes from virtue, even if it seemingly is not rewarded in a worldly fashion. There is still a strength, a steadfastness there that evil just doesn't have, and that this in itself is reward enough. Now, as I said, a lot of this you can kind of critique, I think, because Boethius is saying that everything works out according to God's plan, which is ultimately good. That is a very contestable position to make. There are a lot of starving children out there. There are a lot of children dying of AIDS and malaria, who have barely come into the world before they are viciously and brutally yanked out of it. There are a lot of not only humans that suffer, but also animals that suffer unduly in the world out there, that are torn apart by other animals, or die of starvation or thirst or what have you. There is so much catastrophe in the world, so much tragedy in the world, that to say that the plan of the world is a good plan, I think that is a matter of perspective, I would say. And again, I think that is something that you can hotly contest. But I do understand Boethius's reasoning behind this. I mean, he does provide like actual like logical reasoning behind all this. This is very, very much in line with like the works of Aristotle. Um, Now, the soundness of the logic that he uses in this, again, you can probably critique, but he does try to lay out his reasoning here. But really, we can kind of view this work, if you're being cynical about it, you can view this as kind of a work of sophistry, of a man desperately trying to comfort himself in his darkest hour when he is staring death in the face and trying to say, this isn't as bad as it looks. Basically, if you're being really cynical, you can say that. But I do understand the mentality behind this, and I think even though it is not exactly ironclad in terms of its reasoning, it is admirable. I will say that. I think there is an admirable quality to this. And of course, we also go into the issues of free will and how that can work in accordance with the supposed omniscience of God. Um, now, that is probably the most intensively, like, truly philosophical aspect of the book, because he really has to lay out some pretty detailed reasoning for that. And I liked it. I thought he made some pretty good arguments for the existence of free will and how it can work in conjunction with foreknowledge. I think it's I think he did a pretty good job with certain aspects of this book, perhaps some more than others. But yeah, that's pretty much the book. It just cuts off after that. It's like there is no end to this. There is no resolution. Once he's done talking about what he wants to talk about, it just cuts off. And so that's the book. Now, what's interesting about this book, what I found interesting, is that as I mentioned, Boethius is canonized as a Christian saint. And why that's of interest to me is because you would think that a man who is regarded as a literal saint, when he's staring death in the face, would probably invoke Christ, the explicitly the Christian God, in such a scenario. But Boethius doesn't. He not only is his conversant a fictitious personification of philosophy, not religion, but there is no mention of Jesus or anything in this book. It could almost be like kind of a pagan work, like something out of ancient Greece. It's almost like that. I mean, it's neither here or there. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it kind of surprised me that even though Boethius has been canonized, this is not a particularly explicitly Christian work. It's definitely just kind of in an Aristotelian tradition, not quite so much in an explicitly Christian one. But anyway, so yeah, that is the Consolation of Philosophy. Now, as per usual, when I review philosophical works such as this, I'm going to abstain from awarding this a letter grade because I don't think you can really do that with a work such as this because ultimately the value of such a work as this comes down to how sound or unsound its philosophy is. And as I said, I think that Boethius's intentions here were very noble. I think they were. And it is a work that, as I said, I believe that one can gain a great degree of solace from. But it's also one that you can really take issue with and critique if you want to, because a lot of the stuff in here you can probably come at from different angles and maybe subvert what he's trying to say here. Um, Probably maybe pick holes in some things. So, is it the most like bulletproof thing ever? Probably not. But I do still admire this work. I do think this is a laudable work, and it is a work that I personally enjoy reading quite a lot. I feel like I really got a lot out of reading this because even though it may not be as intensive or as deep, quote unquote, as something like Being in Time or something. I think this is a book that has a lot to offer to a lot of people. And I think that people out there who are maybe perhaps going through a rough time in their life need some kind of pick me up, something to perhaps lift their spirits, brighten their outlook. This very well might do it. And again, you may be able to critique Boethius's reasoning in here, you may be able to critique his arguments, but the intentions behind those arguments, I think, are very, very noble. And I think that this book is still one of great value, regardless of the actual ultimate soundness of its content. I think it still has a lot to offer to people out there. So I'm not going to award it a letter grade, but I will say that I enjoyed it thoroughly myself. I think it's a fantastic work, regardless of however you may come away uh, thinking of it. I think it's a fantastically written work that is, it's a very laudable effort by a man who was in a very dire state in his life, and I think that a lot of it has the potential to translate to other people. Even still today. So, no letter grade, but I liked it, and I think a lot of other people out there might stand to get a lot out of it themselves. So yeah, The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. Have you read The Consolation of Philosophy? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything that I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read The Consolation of Philosophy, I could definitely recommend this. I think it is a crackerjack work and one that has endured for a reason. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.